Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is September 2nd, 2021, and in this video we're going to do some comments and criticism of a video by Reich-Wing Watch about secular talk and Krystal Ball and Jimmy Dore vis-a-vis the squad. So if you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. So yeah, on this channel we teach Marxist theory, leaning towards Marxist-Leninist theory. And part of that is through audiobooks, but part of it is through applying it to analysis of current events. There's really no point to studying all of this in a vacuum. We're doing it so that we can learn the lessons of the past and, basically cut through the bullshit and take a shortcut to some real solutions rather than repeating the mistakes over and over and over again. So the US is in dire need of change. We may be in a pre-revolutionary moment right now, and there's a lot of populism going around. I'm not a fan of this. I would much prefer to see an actually Marxist left be built up, and that means that we can't always go along to get along with the Social Democrats and the Radlibs and the populists, often verging into right-wing populism. So that's one of the things that we oppose here on the channel. We have criticized Kyle Kulinski and Krystal Ball and Jimmy Dore in other videos. But I was on Twitter the other day and I saw somebody who I follow, a mutual, and I enjoy their content. They had posted something called The Jimmy Dore Deception by a YouTube channel called Reich-Wing Watch. And I clicked on it and I watched about 20 minutes. It was interesting. I thought that some of their criticisms of Jimmy Dore were valid. And for the people tend to be incredibly hardcore about Jimmy Dore. Let me tell you, first of all, if you're a hardcore Jimmy Dore fan, that's great, that you're seeing past the Democratic Party and the squad and TYT and things like that. So honestly, good. Those are not your friends, and it's nice to wake up to that. But also understand that if you're just moving past that, you're just barely emerging out of the whole headspace of the neoliberal ruling consensus. There's a lot more for you to learn. I know because I was there once myself. I'm trying to give you a shortcut to what it took me more like 15 to 20 years to find, that populism is a dead end. You actually have to study theory, and that's the way that the countries who fought their way out of capitalism did so. It was not by just winging it, and it was not by electing better Democrats or whatever, okay? So that's why we do this. Nobody is above criticism, including me, obviously. We need to not have such a thin skin. What I find in the Jimmy Dore world in particular is people tend to get super personal, assume all criticism is malicious, and just defend the guy like viciously without any critical investigation whatsoever of any of the points. Therefore, there's a lot of stuff that's getting passed off there that does need some criticism. Anyway, like I said, this is the first of two videos we're going to be doing from Reich-Wing Watch, which I don't think is the same thing as Right-Wing Watch. I'm not really sure who is behind this, but I will say up front, what I saw in the Jimmy Dore video that they did were some valid criticisms, and then a lot of stuff that was kind of hyping the squad. I'm doing this shorter video to kind of prep everybody for that. So let's take a look at this video and see what they have to say.
The following is how Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kulinski, and Krystal Ball reacted to Nancy Pelosi making her support for Donald Trump's October 2020 stimulus plan contingent on specific demands to highlight what she wanted in the bill. It's important to note that while Pelosi was obviously playing politics and would never do this under a Democratic president, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had already signaled he would not vote for Trump's stimulus plan either. After this video montage, I'll show you how these three leftist commentators did a 180 once it became Biden's stimulus package being voted on.
This deal was on the table. Nancy Pelosi said, no deal. She said the, quote, heart of the matter is that Trump's administration's refusal to adopt national coronavirus testing and tracing plan is a non-starter.
If you actually care about the people who are lining up at food banks, the kids who are going hungry, the families about to get their lights and gas shut off heading into the bitter winter months, the restaurant owners whose dreams are all going up in smoke, the airline workers who've been kicked to the curb by the thousands. This is about as good as it's going to get.
The incompetent criminals ruling the United States are about to push millions of Americans off a terrifying financial cliff.
So she was saying, listen, I understand people need money. The deal's on the table. However, since your deal doesn't include anything on coronavirus testing and tracing, we're done here.
It is cruel political calculus from Pelosi, playing games with people's lives.
She's the resistance. Steph, did you know that? Did you know that Nancy Pelosi is the resistance? What she's resisting is relief to people for the coronavirus. That's what she's resisting.
What should be done? Listen, I mean, I would take the deal. I would take this deal. Whatever things are in there that are issues, it's a bullet that you can and should bite to help families who desperately need it.
This is not about what's good for Americans. It's about political power. And frankly, it's disgusting.
I don't know if Nancy knows this, but unemployment was supposed to be temporary. Now it's permanent for 4 million people while she's the most powerful person in Congress.
I mean, this is way past due anyway. People literally can't pay the bills. So you got to get the money to them.
Even this $1.8 trillion proposal, the Senate GOP is unlikely to go along with. Do you think you're going to get better than that? You think you're going to get more money than that?
Hey, Nancy, it's us about to be homeless. Hi, Nancy, it's us about to be homeless.
Now, you know, another thing that they could do, which they won't do, but if I was Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, I would say, I would call their bluff and accept this deal and then let the Senate Republicans slap it down and point the finger at them.
Anyone who values humanity over this posturing should make their voices heard. Take this deal.
And that's a picture of hundreds of Kentucky residents waiting in line outside the Kentucky Career Center for help with their unemployment claims.
You could just pass a standalone, clean stimulus bill.
It might not be perfect, but an unrealized imaginary perfection is not going to keep the babies fed and the electric on when the winter turns cold.
Nancy Pelosi is trying to stop Trump from giving people something so they'll vote for him. So Nancy Pelosi is your enemy, not Trump in this situation.
Okay, we get the point. This is going on for a super long time. Let me jump in here. So that last thing that Jimmy Dore said, that's a really bad point to make. Trump definitely is your enemy from a Marxist proletarian point of view. Neither of the capitalist parties, the Democrats, the Republicans, even the libertarians, they get elected locally some places. They're all tools of the 1%. Like, they all want basically the same thing. None of them are your friend. And, we're going to go more into Jimmy Dore in the next video. Anyway, that was a bad point. Overall, though, I, too, was in favor of this deal. And I don't really understand what Reich-Wing Watch, whoever that is trying to do with that caption at the bottom, "Don't leverage your vote." What actually happened in this situation was the Democrats let people basically hang out to dry, getting between $150 and $200 a week, not enough to survive on, for 5 entire months. Actually, I think a little longer than that, because the new plan didn't kick in until January. That was abhorrent. And yes, there was bad stuff in that bill, such as the corporate immunity for people getting COVID and stuff like that. That wasn't good. I think that Kyle Kalinske was downplaying that a little bit there. But overall, I was in favor of them taking that deal. I think that, not giving people any aid other than that $150, $200 a week was flat out terrible, inexcusable. So I don't know how you defend that exactly, and it's not clear what Reich-Wing Watch's position is on that. But, for my issues with the deficit in the analysis of Jimmy Dore and Krystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske here, I basically reached the same conclusion, which is this is an emergency situation, and there was bad stuff in that bill. I just don't know how consequential it was, when you had no deal then for like 5.5 months. So you see what I'm saying? We had nothing that whole time. And when the Democrats got in power, couldn't they have just put another bill into place, as they did? So that didn't make a lot of sense to me. So far, I don't really agree with the overall position, but let's see where it goes.
It is a really, really bad moment. It's a bad moment for the American people. It's a bad moment for the Democrats.
And we saw the way that the initial unemployment plus up really, truly helped people. Poverty actually went down. Like, take the deal.
You're going to have a colossal wave of evictions, foreclosures, homelessness, suicide, desperation, despair, all of that stuff.
Their betrayal of the working class, the betrayal of the poor, the working class, the immigrants, students, the elderly. Nancy Pelosi and Christine Pelosi are the garbage people who have betrayed them.
It's a bad moment for a potential future left-wing movement, and we got to acknowledge the reality. It's a crime that there isn't a stimulus that already happened. It's a crime.
You heard it. Pelosi is playing politics. She's inflicting harm on Americans by leveraging her vote. Just pass the Trump stimulus bill and let those who voted against it take the heat. So obviously they wouldn't want any Democrat to block Biden's stimulus and inflict more harm on suffering Americans, right?
Okay, no. So this is a fatally flawed analysis from Reich-Wing Watch. We actually, because I said the same thing at the time and I stand by it, they weren't saying don't leverage your vote. So Reich-Wing Watch is trying to make it out that Pelosi should have leveraged her vote for something more. Well, that wasn't going to happen. They had reached the agreement that they had, had the negotiations that they had. My point is they didn't gain anything by just hanging Americans out to dry during an emergency for almost half a year. They didn't gain anything by doing that. Like, flat out, what are you saying that Pelosi was leveraging here? She didn't get anything. They just literally let us hang out to dry until Biden got in. And people got fucked in the process. And Biden isn't objectively doing much better, like, now that he's in office. So if you're saying that she was leveraging it to get a better deal, you're wrong. All she did was wait and gambled that Biden was going to beat Trump. That wasn't any political, negotiation as far as the bill and getting it passed earlier. Leveraging would involve something outside of the deal to have an impact on the deal. Instead, she just didn't make a deal. Which impacted what? Maybe it impacted the election. Maybe. And maybe Biden was going to win anyway because Trump was a fucking idiot who got in on a fluke. So I'm not really, this isn't a good case, I don't think, by Reich-Wing Watch. And of the things that I have criticized Secular Talk and Krystal Ball and Jimmy Dore on, this really isn't one of them. It was a bad situation all around. And I think that giving people no additional benefits during a crisis was a really bad move. I know that everybody I talked to who was affected by that said their mental health went down the tube just from all the additional strain, let alone the people who really did get behind on bills, weren't just worrying about getting behind on bills, but actually did fall behind. So anyway, yeah, it was a bad situation that I do agree Pelosi made worse. And then what did we get out of it? We got Joe Biden. Worth it? Yeah, you tell me. Leave me a comment.
So the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill is it passed the Senate. It's going to pass the House. There's a lot of good stuff in this bill. People need the help. You have the $3,000 child tax credit, which would cut child poverty in half. You have the $300 a month unemployment. You have the $1,400 stimulus checks. You have relief for states that were getting obliterated as a result of COVID.
And also, I was looking at the numbers. If you compare this one with some of the previous packages under Trump, The help goes much more to individuals and families than it does to businesses. A much, much larger chunk going directly to individuals.
It basically saves over 1 million people's pensions.
That's another thing.
This stimulus bill is popular among everybody, including Republicans. It has way more than majority support.
Well, this bill, in many ways, is a phenomenal piece of legislation.
We should be happy that we moved the Overton window to the point where we have things to complain about, but which are still pretty good.
$2,000 checks and the $15 minimum wage. It's not in there.
The thing is, if 6 out of the 10 House Democrats draw a line in the sand and say they aren't voting for a COVID relief bill without a minimum wage hike in it, they become instant megastars.
Being willing to go hard enough to say, look, I'm going to blow this whole thing up if we don't get $15 minimum wage in the package. That would be actual hardball.
That is colossally depressing.
And you didn't flex the leverage that you obviously and actually do have.
First of all, why is it that centrists always go so much harder than the progressives?
Yeah.
Bernie is giving his good friend Joe progressive cover.
People are literally dying in the streets, and she doesn't seem to have any urgency, doesn't seem to give a shit.
Manchin would be totally willing to blow something up because he doesn't
did
like
already.
that. You know, I mean, he's just always willing to walk away, go to the mat.
If they were Republicans, they probably would fight.
Now, she's technically for $15 minimum wage if she doesn't have to do anything to get it.
If they were Republicans, they wouldn't fall in line. They would hold out for what they wanted.
It's not unacceptable. It is acceptable because Bernie Sanders just told us it's a great bill and you're all going to vote for it today.
Honestly, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Hey, let's push Biden. Let's say that our votes are contingent on something.
Even the committees that she and other progressive members wanted to be put on, they were even shut down at that. So it's hard to see how the current strategy is really working.
If those over 20 House Democrats voted as a bloc, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill would not be able to pass. I mean, this is way past due anyway. People literally can't pay the bills. So you got to get the money to them.
Reminder, you and a handful of progressives could band together and refuse to pass the bill without the $15 minimum wage. Hey, Nancy, it's us about to be homeless. Hi, Nancy, it's us about to be homeless.
The only people who had the power to force them to do that were those over 20 House Democrats.
All it takes is political courage. If you do not, then you also believe that these poverty wages are acceptable. That is a fact.
You said $15 minimum wage. You said it. I didn't make you say it. You said it.
Gee, if you and say 4 to 6 other members of the House had it within your power to vote no on a piece of must-pass legislation in order to make sure $15 an hour was included in the bill before you'd vote yes on it, that would mean using leverage, something you don't want to do.
But there's a difference.
Okay, I think this video is getting kind of convoluted because I literally thought in this section that Reich-Wing Watch was trying to make one point, and then I think after watching for a minute that they're actually trying to make another. But I think, and part of the reason that was confusing to me, and I'm pausing it here to just try to straighten this out and make sure I even know the point that they're trying to make. I think that they're trying to say that they're being hypocritical. I mean, the title of the video is Jimmy, Kyle, Krystal flip-flop to attack the squad. So they're trying to portray this as a flip-flop. Okay. So I was not really weighing in on one side or the other. I was just happy they were passing something. And this whole conversation about including $15 an hour in it or not, at the time was really lost on me. I was just like, extend the goddamn unemployment. I didn't really care. I think that the case that Jimmy and Krystal and Kyle are making, again, this is like a relatively small little echo chamber on the left. I'm not sure how widely felt those views are. I know that I wasn't particularly feeling them at the time, although, again, I wasn't really thinking about this at the time. I think you could go 50-50. It's, you could go either way. You can make a case for just pass the damn thing and don't make a stir, or you could say, well, it's going to pass anyway because they've already held it up for 6 months. And so why don't we try to jam a little bit more into it? And it's risky, but, and would they be bluffing or wouldn't they by saying that we'll actually blow the whole thing up? Because honestly, that's for me, the controversy is like, you could actually wind up turning popular support against you. I mean, again, I'm looking at all this from like social democratic logic. As a Marxist, we try not to get this involved in electoral politics because none of it works for the people really ever. And I think that that's part of the frustration and just toxicity of this environment is like, you're just looking for change from a system which is designed not to change, is designed not to listen to you. So, you know, I don't know what exactly anyone is expecting. But as far as Reich-Wing Watch's point that they're being hypocritical, I think that Reich-Wing Watch is actually basically wrong on that because it's a fundamentally different situation. You know, we know that time moves forward and circumstances sometimes change as it does so. In this case, we're not talking about keeping the benefits constant, which was the issue back before the election when Pelosi was holding things up, really just against some Republican measures, and was, you know, they were really talking about, I mean, obviously they weren't bluffing. They really let people get hung out to dry for over 5 months. So that was, as I said, indefensible. And that was a new situation at the time. And it was also, you know, the Pelosi Democrats against the Trump Republicans. Well, you have a different situation in January. Biden's president, so they're no longer going against Trump in the White House. The Democrats would be under enormous pressure. I mean, because they've already let people hang out to dry for almost half a year, which wasn't the case the first time. I think that Jimmy, Krystal, and Kyle are actually correct in saying that there is, you know, the Democrats were just going to pass whatever, and the squad might have had a shot at digging in their heels and say, we know you can't wait any longer, you know, without totally losing popular support for your party completely. And we know that, you know, but we also know that procedurally we can hold up this vote and, you know, not vote on it, and unless you put $15 in there. Again, is that the best calculation to make? I don't know. Do I think that they're necessarily hypocritical for arguing for that? No, I don't. Like I said, it's a different situation. So I think Reich-Wing Watch tried and failed on this point. There's still about another third of this video left.
Between tweeting and using power, leveraging power to really put pressure on legislators who aren't willing to go the distance.
And you got to be able to walk away. I mean, that's the bottom line. These moderates are willing to say, hey, we're not going to vote for this if we don't get a tax cut for the rich in the salt cap removal. So, yeah, you've got to be...
That's my favorite.
You got to be willing to actually walk away. It might not be perfect, but an unrealized imaginary perfection is not going to keep the babies fed and the electric on when the winter turns cold.
You said $15 minimum wage. We're not voting for this bill unless it has a $15 minimum wage in there. I mean, I would take the deal. I would take this deal. Whatever things are in there that are issues, it's a bullet that you can and should bite to help families who desperately need it.
These people tweet, they don't fight.
They didn't fight.
It's true that if you and 5 other progressives refuse to sign the bill without $15 an hour, it will have to go back to the Senate. If so, please take a stand for us. She's the resistance. Steph, did you know that? Did you know that Nancy Pelosi is the resistance? What she's resisting is relief to people for the coronavirus. That's what she's resisting.
You want to know why Joe Manchin always gets what he wants? Because he says, I'm not going to fucking vote for it unless it's what I want.
The excuse is always, oh, well, you know, they put this bill in front of us and people are struggling, and so we just had to vote yes on it.
Yes.
But no, that's your leverage.
You say you all want $15 minimum wage. Prove it. Fight for it.
That's why people like Jank are coming out now and saying if they don't do it now, they're never going to do it. And
what is our mechanism to hold our progressive politicians who we all helped get elected? How do we hold them accountable? Nobody has an idea, and I have an idea. You tell them, I'm going to tell people to stop donating to you. That's my mechanism.
Yeah. If you're not going to fight on this, you're not going to fight on anything.
Justin, didn't AOC say to you directly on Twitter, she said the reason why we're not going to force the vote now is so we can do things like fight for a $15 minimum wage later that can pass, right? Remember she said that to you.
Thank you, Bernie, for folding and not fighting for the $15 minimum wage.
To withhold and use your leverage to fight for working class people against the establishment. That's it. And they won't do it.
If they were Republicans, they would probably fight.
Well, that's all it takes, 6 people to derail any legislation right now, and they won't do it.
You guys are embarrassing, man. You guys are embarrassing. You are on the moral high ground if you fight for it.
Jim.
Okay, so just pausing again. That's a weird still of AOC in the back. Anyway, yeah, I think Reich-Wing Watch is really failing to make this point. In the one case, it was Pelosi versus Trump. And in another case, it was the squad against Pelosi. Those are different situations that also occurred at different points in time with different people in the White House. And I just don't think this holds up. Also, Reich-Wing Watch is throwing in force the vote stuff. I was supportive of force the vote. Jimmy lost me right after with the other things he did. But, I mean, to a pretty severe point, actually. And I made a whole video about that at the time. But anyway, yeah, I think this wasn't about force the vote. This wasn't about Medicare for all. They're throwing that stuff in there. So I think that this is it's not a good point. I don't agree on the point. Also, the video is badly made because you're mixing your evidence. You're talking about the $15 an hour here, and then you're talking about force the vote and Medicare for all there. That wasn't the original conversation. So yeah, there's like another couple of minutes. Let's see.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
AOC is doing an impression of a mime trapped inside her own box of lies.
Oh.
Just acknowledge and admit you're not leaders. You're followers. Admit it. Admit it. It's a fact. It's a fact.
And everyone knows that the Justice Democrats aren't going to, they're nutless wonders.
Leaders would fight on this. Leaders would take the fire from the media, would take the fire from leadership.
And those people who defended the squad and defended inaction, like the Young Turks, are taking a fucking hit for it. Thank God.
It's honestly, it really is just pathetic. It's pathetic. If you're not going to fight for this, you're not going to fight for anything.
And I would like to know, what is the leverage he's going to use to force this vote? He could put a hold on the coronavirus relief. Is he going to do that?
There's nothing else to say except your failures.
What is the point of voting for people who don't take corporate money if they just do the bidding of the people who do? The answer is there isn't one.
But they're willing to say it and suggest it without leveraging their vote and fighting. So they don't even understand politics 101.
But nothing is going to change. Nothing.
Or they don't really want it as much as they say they do. They don't really care that much. Those are the only two options. Either they know absolutely nothing about politics, or they know they just don't really care that much.
50 Republicans will vote against it. A large number of Democrats will vote against it. 2, certainly. Manchin and Sinema, probably plenty of others. So what we're saying is, let's do something to be defeated. Is that a strategy? I mean, you know, it's nice to say, I want this, but we're not children.
Okay, and that's the end of the video. I disagreed with that pretty much start to finish, down to I really can't stand Noam Chomsky, and what he just said here is part of why. My understanding, for example, of how Canada got universal health care is that it was a long, protracted struggle. They introduced province-wide health care, and then there were efforts to spread it to the national level. It was fought. Doctors had strikes. And that's also in the U.S. The main industry lobbying against universal health care was the AMA. Anyway, that's for another time. But that was in the 40s how universal health care was defeated in the U.S. was a massive reactionary campaign by the AMA. Got their member doctors to oppose it, called it a communist plot, all this other stuff. Anyway, they had a huge fight, and legislation was introduced multiple times and defeated. They kept at it, because every time you do something, you are agitating the people, and you can point out who's opposing it, and you can actually do things. So, you know, when you're fighting for reforms here at Socialism for All, we embrace a revolutionary outlook. That is not to say that reforms are never useful or necessary. Sometimes they can be. Of course, the revolution is how you actually cement those reforms. If you leave the capitalists in power, they can try to roll them back at any time. You eventually have to have a revolution so that the capitalists don't have the power to do that anymore. Anyway, but yeah, so this idea that, just try, we can only try once, and if we fail once, then, we're just done, or that there's no value in that. There's absolutely value in it. And I said all this when I was advocating force the vote back in January. It was like, we need some action around this issue. We need agitation, and we need a spotlight. We need to get it into the media, because this would be a huge source of relief for people in the U.S. to just not have to worry about their health care. Health care can be amazingly expensive in the U.S. So anyway, you're speaking of, we're not children. Fuck you, Noam Chomsky. Anyway, moving backwards, I just need to point out, one thing you need to know about Kyle Kulinski is he desperately wants to be Cenk Uygur. If you replay this video, you can see his full-on Cenk impression. And I just always find that funny. And you really can't unsee it once you've seen it. Anyway, what Jimmy and Kyle and Krystal are doing here is something I support as far as it goes, which is fighting the narrative that the Democratic Party is your friend. They aren't. They aren't. They aren't. They aren't. And unfortunately, that includes the squad. I could love it if the squad was really fighting for things and they really represented some opposition, and Bernie Sanders was really fighting, and that this could eventually spin off into a left movement, and etc. That's not what's happening, and just lying to ourselves about that isn't helping anyone. I'm not going to say the squad has never done anything positive. I'm saying it's not remotely enough, and when they're criticized, they often just kind of gaslight their accusers. So anyway, this was, I think, a complete faceplant by Reich-Wing Watch, and worthless. So, I mean, and ending with the Noam Chomsky thing, can you get more U.S. left than that? I don't know. Anyway, I regularly make videos criticizing people like Kyle Kulinski for being anti-communist, anti-socialist, which this channel is Marxist, so we're trying to take a stand for Marxism and not just say, well, the best we can do is social democracy. Well, no, it isn't. And actually, we need to build the Marxist left. I don't care if it takes a couple of years or whatever. We need to do it, and we have the technology to reach people and have these conversations. For people who already have realized the logical and historical limitations of social democracy. So anyway, bad job, Reich-Wing Watch. And honestly, for the most part, though I disagreed with some of the things said in here by Krystal and Jimmy and Kyle, and just looking at Sauger and Jetty, that guy's a piece of trash. That was not a fun throwback there. But anyway, they came out looking, unfortunately, better than Reich-Wing Watch, who, what were you trying to do with this? Because I don't think you did it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks to the current patrons. I'm going to be doing a follow-up to this, which is just on Reich-Wing Watch's video about Jimmy Dore. I think that's a really mixed bag. They make some good points and then really fail in ways similar to this video. So check that out. They should both be up on the channel today. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next one.